Let's take you back to this. It is the 29th of November. That means it is Black Friday, and South African shoppers had been eagerly anticipating this day, although many stores, of course, began offering deals in the days leading up to this highly anticipated event. At the Mall of Africa in Midrand for us, some people have already started lining up for the specials, and that's where we'll find SABC's anchor Ayanda Nyathi live at the Mall of Africa for us. Ayanda, of course, where I'm seeing you now, there isn't a lot of activity, but just talk to us. Perhaps on other parts of the mall, you'd seen those long queues. What's happening there?
Yeah, Unathi, earlier when we spoke, I told you I'm not the most conscious brand person, but I do love me a good meal. So we're coming to you from the food court here at the Mall of Africa. And typically on any day, especially on a Black Friday where you anticipate a lot of people to be at this particular area, you'd expect a hive of activity. But my goodness, I think if you weren't really following the news or perhaps had slipped into a coma about a month ago, you'd be none the wiser that there's this extra emphasis, if you like, on retail shopping and everything that comes with that, because it really looks like any other day at this particular food court. Just going to step out of shot for a moment, get you a glimpse of what it's looking like at the very least. People going about their business. It's really just a district where you get takeaways in some instances. But again, you wouldn't struggle to find a seat here, which really is indicative of the fact that, as people predicted, this is a Black Friday with a difference. And in fact, some of the more management that spoke to us have mentioned that this has been the case since post the COVID-19 pandemic. You saw this huge migration to online shopping, and it's starting to have an impact on, the kind of footprint that you're able to see, the footsteps, I should say, in places like the Mall of Africa. A stark contrast, by the way, to what we saw when this particular institution opened its doors back in 2016. I mean, many people who were around at the time will tell you just how we saw those snaking queues, a lot of people ready with their trolleys, some of them mentioning at the time that they'd been in the queue since 3 a.m. in the morning. Nothing of that sort. In fact, we arrived here early this morning, and frankly, some of the shops were still closed, which is certainly not what you're used to. But we're going to try and take a walk, Unathi. Bear with us as we take you through what we're able to spot at this particular mall. And perhaps if we're lucky enough, we'll get some people to speak to us. The shoppers are a bit shy, especially when the camera's on. It's a very different picture, of course, when we're waiting for you to come to us. But you can just see, Unathi, I mean, it's a breeze to even walk through some of the spaces here at the Mall of Africa, which is not what we're used to in the past, because as mentioned earlier, typically you'd anticipate a whole lot more traffic. What you're seeing now is one of the major supermarkets, at least saw just a short while ago. Again, easy flow in and out. The trolleys that people are pushing around aren't really that full. It's clearly a Friday, so a lot of people grabbing something to drink for the weekend ahead. But I think it would be absolutely exaggerating to say that there's been a lot of people, because frankly, it seems to have been much of the run-of-the-mill type situation that you would see on every day. So we've been stationed here, and earlier on, like I mentioned, we got an opportunity to speak to the management at this particular mall, who mentioned to us that perhaps there'll be a whole lot more traffic online. But we're going to try and speak to one of the guys at this particular shop. It seems rather quiet, so they seem rather shy. Are you willing to speak to us? How are you doing, sir? We're live on the SABC.
Thanks. How are you, man?
Good. Thanks for asking. I hope you're well too. It's meant to be Black Friday, meant to be quite busy, but we're not seeing that today.
It is quite busy. It's just that we are a new store, so I guess that's the reason why we're not as busy as other stores.
All right. And what do you think is going to make the difference, at least when it comes to this particular store? Because, I mean, as you can imagine, a lot of deals are out there and people are spoiled for choice.
I guess our price, the price is right. Our price is much better than everyone else, and I guess marketing going forward should help.
What's your sense of how busy, typically speaking, the Mall of Africa has been? I mean, when they opened in 2016, it was difficult to even find parking here.
I'm only here for 2 months, but it is quite busy. There's lots of traffic here.
How's your 2 months been?
It's been quite busy.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. There, just took a chance to speak to this one gentleman who was here at a store which I suppose busy is subjective nowadays, but I haven't been able to spot a lot of people coming through here. And so Nyathi, we're waiting to see at the end of this process what the numbers will look like. Some of the people who've been watching the data, who make these predictions, who are part of a number of financial institutions, actually saying that the confidence levels has improved from where it was, at least before COVID-19. I mean, we know a lot of households took a bit of a battering over indebted South Africans, still struggling to cope with the cost of living crisis. But hopefully the easing of the repo rate, inflation cooling to a 4-year low, which is what we saw in October, hopefully all of that will make all the difference. But even for people who can afford to spend a little extra today, it seems are now taking up the opportunity to do so using alternatives rather than making their way to one of South Africa's biggest mall here in Midrand.
And Ayanda, I mean, I would imagine that perhaps even maybe later on we might see a change. But in the main, and in fact, the story that we are running this afternoon, earlier I spoke to Dr. Azar Jamin, an economist, who was saying that, you know, even though things are somewhat different from what we've seen from the economic space in terms of recovery since 2023, not much has changed. So people shouldn't really be rushing out to get there, which is quite telling because it also tells you that South Africans are still struggling in terms of high prices, even though we are seeing these drastic discounts, coming out in this particular day of Black Friday.
Absolutely. People who Nyathi are prioritizing what they reckon is important. And outside of just some of the luxuries that they're able to grab at places like this, we must, of course, understand that for many, the rand must stretch quite far beyond just, the items here. People must consider things like insurance. There's obviously things like school fees. And many of the parents who were brave enough to speak to us off air are suggesting that they'd rather prioritize that, quite frankly, at least those who we've spoken to in the lead up to today. And so it comes as no surprise, really, for people who've been watching the build up to today. What shouldn't be lost to us as well, Nyathi, is that unlike in the past, people have had the opportunity to actually flock to these areas over the past 5 days. Black Friday in the term is very loosely used nowadays because from Monday already we were told that a lot of these deals went up, and the sense we're getting is that there has been a steady response to that as opposed to this one kind of massive response that we see on just a 24-hour cycle. And so there's a few things to consider, but in the main, we certainly aren't where people are hoping we'd be, and that's why it seems not a lot of people are making it rain, as we say colloquially, in places like this at the Mall of Africa.
And Ayanda, before I let you go, just something that you raised earlier on, that one of the other reasons we may not be seeing so many people, flocking to the malls, as it were. One, we've mentioned it, of course, and that is that some retailers had been actually on promotion mode for quite some time. But the other reason is that people are perhaps choosing nowadays to go online. But we did speak about the dangers of that and why people are sometimes apprehensive to go online because of cybersecurity issues, for one. Just talk us through, just the advice that you've been hearing in as far as shopping online.
Absolutely. I mean, Nyathi, the cyber crimes have become so sophisticated nowadays that in some instances you'd be forgiven for being duped because of just how convincing some of these particular attacks are. And it's not just a South African problem, by the way. The world over, there's been this migration to what is a whole lot more convenient shopping online. And, the attacks come in multiple forms. There's obviously the old trick of sending links that send you to websites where you can then suffer software or malware to your particular system. But what we also are finding is that some scammers are taking over particular domains, creating websites that resemble a legitimate store, advertising all kinds of deals, obviously, and once you click on them, you're redirected without knowing, and before you know it, your bank account has been cleared. And so, whilst on the one hand, there is the tried and tested method of just getting out of your house and rocking up to a place like this at the Mall of Africa. On the other, some people are going for what's convenient online, but are being warned to really have their wits about them when it comes to checking out some of these more sophisticated ways in which people are now worming their way into these particular systems. And the advice has always been the same, Unathi. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. What the scammers are looking out for are all of our human desires, that feeling of getting that deal that nobody else will be able to get. And so if you're hopefully able to do this sober-mindedly, you should be able to pick it up. Just keeping to those basics of trying to ascertain the extent to which deals are realistic and the extent to which, frankly, they're not.
Ayanda, let's leave it there for now. Hopefully you will also squeeze in some time to go shopping on this day since you are already in the mall. But thank you so much for that, Ayanda Nyathi, just giving us that rolling coverage there, of course, at the Mall of Africa, where some shoppers seemingly reluctant at this point in time.